Let's get hyped. Welcome back to the 2022 season that you just can't wait to end. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Brunch, Brian Christopherson, and our special guest on the Husker HypeCast this week for Indiana. We have brought in Nebraska's own Todd Peterson. Todd, welcome back to the HypeCast. I believe this is your third appearance. Is that right?
That sounds right. I thought, if we're going into this season, I thought you guys went to a visual medium and you were going to stop inviting me because I'm just not attractive enough.
No, we still look how we do, and they still let us be on camera. So I don't think we're worried about you in the slightest, quite frankly.
I didn't know if he'd fit in the frame, being 6'4", but he does. Oh, yeah, that was what I was worried about right there.
We're forcing him to hunch down. Now he has bad posture. It's all our fault.
Yeah.
That's terrible. That's terrible. All right, Todd, before we dive into the very important questions that I have clearly written out for today's show, your initial thoughts on where things sit with Nebraska football. No more Scott Frost, no more Eric Chinander, some changes, obviously coming off a bye week and the worst performance of the year, I guess, against Oklahoma. I mean, I think that's worse than their performance against Georgia Southern, even though they lost that, or Northwestern. But where are you right now as Nebraska's 1-3?
Kind of in the same boat, trying to pick what the worst performance has been so far. But it's frustrating. As the fan in me that grew up in Nebraska in the 90s, it's frustrating to watch. The former player in me has some empathy for the guys, having gone through similar things in 2007. And at this point, it's just you hope they can band together and get something to rally around to still kind of have that purpose. Biggest thing is you just don't want to see them quit. So hopefully they can find something and get things going in the right direction.
How much? So obviously it's a different situation because Callahan stayed all the way through the Colorado game. But how much of it do you think is sort of on the players to keep checking with each other to make sure that they're not sort of checking out in a situation like this? Because this is the sort of stretch that if Nebraska is going to do anything, and that's a giant if, but you have games here against Indiana and Rutgers on the road, two teams that if you're able to find ways to win those games, you're back at 3-3, and your season could be written entirely differently. I mean, the chances of it being storybook ending aren't high, but it could be a lot better than being 1-11 too.
Yeah, it's hard because this stretch in October is going to be so big for them. I think it's important kind of on the leadership and for those guys to just be able to communicate the goal and what they want to get done. But it's also a very different era now than when I played with the transfer portal and NIL and the opportunities for guys' minds to be wandering in other places. So it's similar in some ways, but also very different. And there's going to be a bucket of different challenges with that.
All right. Let's go ahead and dive into the Indiana coverage. Nebraska's offense did not do a lot against Oklahoma a couple weekends ago. They had that opening touchdown. They went up 7-0. It was the first touchdown catch for Trey Palmer. BC, what do you want to see out of Nebraska's offense coming out of the bye week? And where do you think this thing is going to look? Because this is sort of the longest stretch, obviously, without Scott Frost. Mark Whipple back in the saddle as Nebraska's offensive coordinator and everything else. So what do you sort of want this to look like? What do you think this will look like on Saturday?
Well, I thought the most discouraging part against Oklahoma was just how much traffic they had allowed in their own backfield. I mean, it was just constant TFLs, and there were 4 sacks given up in the first half. I believe there were almost 9 or 10 TFLs in the first half. And so basically Nebraska was playing the entire part of the game where it mattered still like 3rd and 8 or longer, it felt like. So they've got to win on the early downs. This is obviously a different outfit than Oklahoma. Although Oklahoma's defense showed they're not exactly the 85 Bears this last weekend either. But Indiana, I'm looking at their numbers on defense. I mean, they rank 101st in pass defense, 109th in total defense, 77th against the run. So Nebraska's got to be able to do some things up front. It's going to be a big assignment for Ethan Piper at left guard, making, the start again back into that assignment. He's got to be reliable. And then the guys who have been there up front, they've got to get 2 notches better than they've been. They just got to keep going week to week and climbing a bit. And Casey's got to Casey's got to be a little more dialed in than he was against OU too. He missed some throws that could have moved the chains and maybe kept it from getting quite as out of hand as it did.
Brunts, one of the things Mickey Joseph said after that game is he regretted trying to go as much tempo as he did with Oklahoma. Now the team that runs the most plays in college football and in Indiana, I mean, they are the most aggressive tempo team in the country. Do you think it's even more imperative for Nebraska to try to slow things down this week to sort of combat the way that Indiana plays? Or do you think Nebraska could lean into the tempo that they wanted to play earlier this year?
No, I mean, we talked about it before the Oklahoma game that I think the plan that they had going into last year's Oklahoma game was probably going to benefit this offense the most. They went the complete opposite way and tried to turn it into a track meet, and we saw what happened. The thing that I worry about this week, especially with Indiana trying to play fast, is, how quickly the calls come in with the new defensive coordinator, if there's confusion. And I just think that Nebraska needs to kind of play boring Big Ten West football and control the clock. They need to, grind out some drives. And I think Indiana's defense is one that Nebraska should be able to run against. But I think where Nebraska is going to run into trouble is if you have like Indiana running 105 plays like they did last week against Cincinnati when they lost. So I just don't know that with the way this team is, that anything close to a track meet is what the pace that they want. So slow it down, kill some clock, and don't leave your defense out there too long. Basically, get as close to complimentary football as you can, which Nebraska hasn't done in like 4.5 years.
Todd, two-part question. I guess what on Nebraska's offense has either impressed or surprised you so far, and where have you been a little disappointed 4 games into the season?
I think I've been pretty impressed by some of the skill players, honestly. Some of the new players brought in. Obviously, their running backs have really impressed so far. You hope Gabe Ervin can step in and kind of fill a little bit of the role that Ajay Allen was showing a really nice job of. I've been impressed with Palmer and Washington as the receivers and a band of those guys. The frustrating thing so far has been the offensive line, I think. And I don't think it's, at least from what I've watched, and granted, I haven't been sitting there dissecting it like it's game film, but it looks like they're unaware of how to diagnose pressures and stunts and who they're supposed to be blocking. A lot of those plays 2 weeks ago when guys were in Casey's lap before he, hit his 5th step, like it just looked like they didn't know who to be blocking and guys were coming free or it was too late to adjust. So I think that's frustrating and they need to clean that up and try and keep him clean.
BC, Ajay Allen is done for the year. What does that kind of leave things for Nebraska's running back picture beyond Anthony Grant at this point? Do we see more Ramir Johnson and Jock Yant?
I think first and foremost, Gabe Ervin's the second guy up. But yeah, I think that could open that door a crack for a couple more of those guys, or at least one of those guys to get a few reps. Honestly, of all the positions on the roster, that's not the one that gives me great concern. As much as I really like Ajay Allen, I do. There is sort of an eagerness on an individual basis to see Gabe Ervin. Like, he's a guy who's sort of had his career stop and start. And let's not forget, like last year in fall camp, he was all the talk. I mean, he was the guy who had showed up and won the starting job right away. And everybody was pretty fired up. And then the injury against Oklahoma happened. So I think he's a very capable backup type back that's going to go well with Anthony Grant. So I feel all right about running back. I do. I think Gabe Ervin will be fine. But no doubt the loss of Ajay Allen is a bummer because I know he keeps his red shirt, but I just don't know that in his case, I don't know if that matters a lot, because I think he's a guy who's I don't know if he's going to be in college football 5 years for that matter, so it's that one of those deals. But Gabe Ervin, he'll be ready for it. He's been around the block a little bit now.
Jumping over to the defensive side of the ball, Todd, you were saying before we went live that you're curious how Bill Busch is going to be able to handle everything now as a defensive coordinator. Previously was special teams coordinator. What do you remember of Bill Busch when he was coaching while you were at Nebraska, and kind of what are your thoughts on him being tabbed as a defensive coordinator?
A personable guy. He connects well with the players. Most of the guys that I remember that played on special teams for him really liked him, really liked the things he would draw up. He always came up with great kind of either Thursday night or Friday afternoon meeting film clips, stories. He loves horse racing. I always remember he showed clips of Seabiscuit and related that to special teams. How, I don't know, but it's one of those things you never forget. So I think he'll do a good job there. I worry about how much is going to be on his plate with all of those things. And as we've talked about a little bit already, kind of the outfit that's coming in and having a new defensive coordinator with a team that's really going to come in and step on the gas, or they're going to have to keep that very vanilla. What's going to happen with that? So I think it'll be interesting to watch.
Brunt, what kind of changes are you expecting, if anything, with Nebraska's defense with Bill Busch now as the defensive coordinator?
Yeah, I don't know. My sense is Mickey Joseph said yesterday that they are going to simplify some things. They got rid of some calls that had been, on the play sheet defensively. I think with Indiana coming in, they have to be a little bit more, not simple, but I think something that they can execute and that they can call. And, maybe you see a little bit more aggression. Maybe you see a corner actually up in a wide receiver's face once in a while. Maybe you see a pressure or two that, actually gets home or forces the issue. I think that's just what's been lacking with this defense this year. It's just the entire season has been played on their heels. And I think this group would really respond well to just a challenge of, we're going to go in and we're going to try to force the issue. We're going to be a little bit more aggressive and play a little bit risky. I mean, I think that's the thing that was kind of frustrating to Nebraska fans for so long was, Eric Chenander's defenses were steady, but they were kind of risk averse. And I think that's where Bill Busch can bring a little bit of a different look if he wants to do it. I think they've got the guys on that side of the ball that can do those things, but I'm hoping to see a little bit more of that versus just the almost kind of 7-on-7 defense we've seen at times this season.
Yeah, to Brunt's point, it is somewhat fascinating to be a bend don't break defense that doesn't ever bend. It's just broke. And the fact they're not more aggressive or weren't more aggressive against either Georgia Southern or Oklahoma, I think is part of why Eric Chenander is no longer there. BC, are there players that you're expecting to potentially show up Saturday that we haven't seen a lot of yet? Or is it a lot of the same guys that we kind of know are just going to be expected to figure out how to raise their level, or that you hope the simplicity allows them to raise their level?
It'll be a lot of the same guys. I mean, if there's going to be any new ones inserted, maybe a Deshaun Singleton gets some more reps at safety. Omar Brown getting slid over to the nickel as like the second guy there is kind of interesting. I see if he pops up a little bit more. Beyond that, I know Malcolm Hartzog and Jaden Gold were interesting press conference stories the other day, and you hope to kind of see them get filtered into the system a little bit more as the season goes on. But we're still talking about Malcolm Hartzog as like a fourth or fifth corner and Gold's like the fifth, so I just don't know how realistic it is if this game's close that we're going to see a lot of them. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of different people. I think Brunt's hit it though. Are you going to see a more aggressive defense? If I understand the philosophy of, being that defense where you make a team earn a 13-14 play drive and there's 6-yard paper cuts, but the paper cuts have been like 13 or 14 yards the way they've been playing. So I think that's where you got to say we're already getting burnt. We might as well, as Brunt was saying, take a few more risks and see if we can make a couple plays ourselves.
I didn't warn you guys that this question was coming, mostly because I don't know what I'm going to say before I start saying it. But who's a player in the next third of the season? So Nebraska's done with their first third. who's a player in the next third over these 4 games, all going to be played in October, that you're kind of curious to see how it goes for them specifically? Is there anybody that comes to mind for you, Michael Bruntz, as you stare up into the ceiling looking for an answer?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think one guy that I'm curious to see if he can get it kind of turned around a little bit, and I don't think he's been really bad, but I think we expected a lot of Tommy Hill coming into the season, and I don't know that what we've seen completely has been what we thought we would get, and I think he's a guy that has been frustrated at times when he's been pulled. I think he's probably felt like he should be a little bit farther along with those performances than he is at this point. And I'm curious to see if he can kind of put it together, because obviously Nebraska's defense has not been very good. But if you can get a couple turnovers from somebody like him, that kind of changes the picture a little bit in these 3 games here, where I think they're actually going to be pretty close, in spite of Nebraska's struggles. So I'll go Tommy Hill as my guy that I'm very curious about over the next third.
Todd?
I'll probably go back to the offensive line and say Bryce Benhart. And I don't know if they've made any changes there. I didn't see any sort of depth chart or anything. But again, from what I saw from the other day, it looked like most of his mistakes were mental. It wasn't that he was missing blocks, it's that he didn't know who to block. So I think if he can get that squared away, I still, I don't want to let go of the promise he had and some of the recruiting hype he came in with, and just see if he can get that turned around. Because if that unit can get things turned around, it can cover up a lot of warts, I think.
BT?
You could pick anybody on the defense. Marquise Buford. I mean, I'll say Buford just because I think Buford's going to be a part of things for like the next 2 years around here. I think he's one of those glue guys in the program who we'll still be writing about a year and a half from now as a main guy. And so you want to see a player like him specifically every week take another step where maybe by November, I'm not saying we're thinking about him as being as reliable as like Deontay and Markel were by the end of their careers, but where you feel like he's on a little bit more solid footing and has kind of got through some of the trial by fire errors that come up as a first-year starter.
I'm going to go with Garrett Nelson, in part because I think if he has any aspiration to make it to the NFL, he's got to raise his level. He was more disruptive last year than he's been through the first 4 games so far. Some of that's quick passing game has negated his ability to rush the passer, and he's probably a little bit better there than he would be as a run defender. But he's a guy that, these are 4 teams that don't have, tremendous offensive lines, but they're Big Ten offensive lines. He's had good games in his career. He's had great stretches in his career. It feels like he's been a little bit missing so far through these first 4 games in 2022 for a guy that I thought was one of the 3 or 4 best players on Nebraska's team coming in, or at least one of the 3 or 4 most reliable. And so I'd like to see if we can get to that point here over this, next few game stretch, because if even just he can be a little bit more disruptive, if he's adding some tackles for a loss or able to hound the quarterback a little bit more. We saw when they were able to force turnovers, some of that was just having guys after Kyle Van Treese. So, who was able to, he got the ball away, but ended up in the hands of Marcus Buford. So if Garrett Nelson can kind of get things going, I think that would help in a lot of ways for a defense that just sort of needs better individual performances in addition to maybe a mentality change on top of everything else. All right, it is time for predictions. And that means oddly specific predictions. It means a click to pick and a score prediction. We will start with the oddly specific prediction, and we will start in the bottom right corner. Brian Christopherson, what do you got for us?
I will say Nebraska will have a kick return that gets beyond
20.
No, all right, smart guy.
Okay,
I'll say beyond the 40 right to the 43-yard line, to their own 43-yard line.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's going to kind of pop, and just one, mind you, but they're going to have a kick return. Guy takes it at the 1, gets it to the 43. That'll be one of the most promising kick returns we've seen, maybe since Kenny Bell returned one against Penn State. It feels like it's been that long.
All right, a kick return to the 43. That's where we're getting started today. Todd Peterson, what do you got?
I'm going to go with a trio of touchdown receptions. 2 of them are going to be the same length, 17-yarders for Brody Belt and Marcus Washington. And then Trey Palmer is going to have a third that's going to be 26 yards.
So
17.
Three passing touchdowns for Casey Thompson on Saturday, including one to Trey Palmer for his second. And then Marcus Washington would be his first score, right?
That I don't know.
I don't think he's scored yet this year. I feel like it's
I
been
looked
a lot of
at the schedule to see if the Giants had a bias, to see if maybe I could throw in like Austin Allen suiting back up, but nothing. No luck. No such luck.
You know that Brunts has been watching that schedule closely to see if Austin Allen's anywhere near Nebraska so he can catch a ball. Brunts, what do you got for us?
I'm going to predict total plays between the two teams. I think it's going to be a really long game. I think it's going to...
That's good. It's starting at 6:30 at night. That's the best time for a long game.
I know. This game needed to be at 11 a.m., and I'm disappointed it's not.
On Tuesday.
Yeah. I will say that combined, these two teams will run 181 plays. Is that a lot? Does that feel like a lot?
I mean, yes.
Okay. I'll say 181. And I think it's going to I don't think we get a final gun until about 10:50 Central Time. It's going to be a long one. Settle in.
A 4:20 game for Michael Brooks. That sounds absolutely miserable.
It's gonna feel like a double header with like a rain delay in there.
That's what we need. That's what the people want. I'm going to combine my oddly specific prediction with my pick to click. I think O'Shawn Mathis is not going to have just 1 sack. He's going to have 2.5 sacks on Saturday, just blowing out his numbers so far and Nebraska's pass rush numbers so far. Big day for O'Shawn Mathis. That's my oddly specific prediction, and he's my pick to click. Todd, who are you going with pick to click?
I'm going to stick with wide receivers and go Trey Palmer and say he's going to have a big day outside of that individual touchdown. Didn't say he might not have more. We'll see.
All right. Brunts.
Pick to click. I will say I'll go with Gabe Ervin. I think he gets in there, does some things, does some good things, and I think he'll go for over 50 yards rushing in this game. Gabe Ervin.
You sounded like a football coach at a Monday press conference. Hey, he does some things. He's a good player. He's a good football player. Does some things.
Good player.
Moves well out there.
Move around well out there. Yep.
All right. BC?
I'll just go with an obvious guy, but we often don't mention Casey Thompson in our pick to clicks because we try to be so clever. But I think a lot's going to be riding on Casey sort of being that when he came out like against Northwestern and there was even Georgia Southern that full game, I thought he played really well. And if he's that type of guy, again, I think Nebraska can win Saturday, and I think he can be. And he missed some throws against OU. The O-line play wasn't good, but there were some opportunities there that were not taken advantage of. So I'll say Casey Thompson bounces back a little bit.
All right. I don't know where any of you are going to go with your score prediction. I don't know what score you're going to predict in Brunts' 4-hour, 20-minute game. I don't know, at all who anyone thinks is going to win. So I'm just going to get my prediction out of the way and just sit back and enjoy where the rest of you take this. Nebraska wins its second game, 34-26 over Indiana under the lights. The fourth quarter is absolutely rocking as everyone's fired up by ACDC. That's my prediction, 34-26 Nebraska. Todd Peterson, what do you got?
I'm going to go with a real odd score here. I think I'm going to go like 35-33 Nebraska.
Oh,
I got those touchdowns in there. We'll see. It's going to be a nail biter, but Nebraska wins a one score game.
see, if you knew that you were going to pick that, you could have went with the oddly specific prediction that as time runs out, Indiana scores, misses its 2-point conversion, and Nebraska celebrates on the field.
That's why you're the pro, Mike.
Brunt.
Todd and I are in the same ballpark, and I was initially going to be kind of snarky and say it was going to be a low-score game with all those plays, but I think what's going to happen here is I think you're going to see on the 181st play of the game, you're going to see Timmy Bleekrode knock through about a 26-yarder to win it for Nebraska. Nebraska 38, Indiana 37.
Wow. All right. BC, you got to follow this up.
Okay. Hey, Todd, was your senior year 2008? Is that right? So you were in that game where Nebraska beat Kansas. I think it got bowl eligibility 45-35. It was kind of a shootout game.
Kind of a snowy day, I believe. Yeah.
Roy Halou hurdled the guy.
some people.
Yeah. I'm going to say that I'm going to go, since Todd's on the show, that game's in my mind as kind of this type of offensive, back and forth. I'm going to say Nebraska 45-35. That's not a comfortable win by any means. It's going to be like tense, and there's some play that just gives them a 10-point win. But that's what I'm going with in honor of Todd Peterson and remembering a game from his Husker past. I'll have to look up what his stat line was, though.
Why didn't you go 26-21 in honor of Todd Peterson?
It's just not that kind of game. And hopefully it's not the 49-31 USC game, the other way. But I'll say 45-35 on an optimistic note.
So from Todd Peterson to Todd Reesing here on the HypeCast today. Look at that.
I'll have to throw it to another podcast, but I heard somebody talking about that USC game, just comparing seasons, and they mentioned the score, and one of their co-hosts was like, "It was that close?" And I was like, "That was because of me."
Yeah, it was.
You made it scroll well, Todd. It scrolled well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Todd, we appreciate you joining us again here on the Husker247 HypeCast, and look forward to checking in with you and seeing how you're enjoying the rest of the season and if there's much to enjoy. So appreciate your time as always. For Michael Brunson, Brian Christopherson, I'm Mike Shaver. Be sure to check out everything at Husker247.com. We have plenty of coverage leading up to the game. There will be an official visitor. There will be other recruits on campus. There's certainly going to be more coaching search talk. All of that can be found Husker247.com. Check all of that out right now. We'll catch you with another podcast next week.